I was thinking today we would just kind of have fun with it. What do you think? Does that sound good? Just want to have some fun? Because that's what this is gonna be. All right, minor spoilers for the film Barbarian. I won't be spoiling the ending. I will try to avoid spoiling any of the major plot points because I really do feel like this is one of those movies that you kind of need to go into it blind to really enjoy it. There are certain things I will be spoiling. I'm using my discretion, but you have no reason to trust me. You don't know me. So proceed at your own risk. Chapter 1, The Zero-Sum Game of Film. Or whatever Taylor decides to call this. She usually comes up with better chapter titles. We often talk about creation as an act of filling a void. The script for this chapter, for example, began moments ago as a blank Google document, and now there are 39 words. From my brain alone, imagine that. There was gonna be no video essay, and now, out of nothing, poof, a video essay. Okay, maybe I can think of a more compelling example of artistic creation. So when Alma Thomas painted her beautiful painting Skylight in 1973, she started with a blank canvas too. A plain white void, a void which she seemed compelled to fill with this beautiful, icy, acrylic abstraction. So that's the one way to think about creating, as an act of filling. But, and I think you probably see where I'm going with this, there is another way to conceptualize it, right? In that moment, when Alma Thomas was looking at that canvas, she could have selected any color in her palette, any brush at her disposal. She also could have lit the whole thing on fire, or dipped it in mustard, or written a raunchy limerick in the blood of those who wronged her. In this conceptualization, that canvas is not a void, it is the opposite of one. A field of limitless possibilities stretching out before her like Elysium. And with each definitive stroke of her brush, trillions upon trillions of those possibilities were snuffed out. Do you like that? Do you like the theatrics? That's kind of fun, right? You having fun? Just checking in. So this is a model of creation that is not an act of filling, but of narrowing, compressing, cutting, eliminating, molding. Both of these are totally valid ways to think about art. But when it comes to storytelling, and especially storytelling from a filmic medium, I tend to think of it more as this process of elimination. After all, filmmaking has a lot of constraints. The financial investment alone pretty much incentivizes doing what you know what works, what has already been shown to garner a return on that investment, which means a general adherence to audience expectation, genre convention, and even the runtime. So it is a zero-sum game. If you only have 100 minutes of movie, every single minute that you spend on this scene or this sequence or developing this character or this theme is 1 minute less for something else. It's a zero-sum game, every minute is precious. So when I start this critique by saying that I really liked what Barbarian was as a movie, but was also very disappointed by the movies that it wasn't, maybe that will make a little more sense. Like, I liked Earth Prime Barbarian. The Barbarian that we got in our universe, in our version of Earth. But I do wonder what the alternative versions of Barbarian could have looked like. Chapter 2, The Good Things About Barbarian, Earth Prime Edition. Earth Prime Barbarian is a confident, gory, gleeful spectacle of a film. Writer-director Zach Kreger just piles on the what the fuck moments on top of you like he's trying to crush you. Which, because I'm a deranged person, is exactly what I love in a movie. It's like Zach Kreger gave me like a weighted blanket of secret doors and achronological zigs and gross out zags. A weighted blanket of warm, delightful aberrations. I also love this movie visually. I loved how the Airbnb scenes really felt like they were being lit by those sallow yellow lamps. It made the whole environment feel more textured, more real, and therefore more voyeuristic. I also really liked all the weird, close panning shots that came out of nowhere, like they were designed to confuse you as to what you were supposed to be paying attention to. Like, oh, is this coffee cup important? Does it matter that he plugs his electric toothbrush into the floor outlet in the bathroom? Not for nothing, but I do think the toothbrush on the floor is going to be the weird cereal eating scene of 2022. I like how a really simple choice, like just really zooming in every single time Tess locks a door, really makes the audience consider the fact that locks are they're just security theater. Like, these would be insufficient to keep out a determined 8-year-old, let alone an intruder. Zach Krieger came up as part of Whitest Kids You Know, and he's been compared to Jordan Peele in his ability to bring his sketch comedy chops to horror, and I think that comparison is very apt. Sketch comedy, like horror, is an act of showmanship in emceeing and controlling the mood of the room. It's like you have this tension valve for each scene or sketch. And this valve builds and releases tension at strategic points to create and uphold a desired audience reaction. If at any point you turn the gauge too far in either direction, the scene will either deflate or pop. Krieger does a really good job of keeping the audience suspended in that breathtaking in-between place. But like all artists, Krieger makes choices about what to focus on. And that's always at the expense of other things because it's a zero-sum game. Chapter 3, the weak characterization. Who are the people who inhabit the world of Barbarian, and what is it that they want exactly? Tess, our protagonist, is in town applying to work for a documentary filmmaker. Why? What about filmmaking appeals to her? Does she have some vested interest in the idea of documenting Detroit life? What's her relationship to documentary filmmaking? We don't know. All we really know about Tess is that she keeps getting trapped in like loveless relationships, and even this begs a lot more questions. Like, why? Why does she keep getting trapped? What is it that she is missing or that she craves that this keeps happening to her? Tess is played in the movie to perfection by actress Georgina Campbell, and she's so good that you almost don't notice that her character is, well, it's sketched out. You know, like charcoal sketch over a much more vividly rendered tableau of blood and depravity. I don't think this was an accident. I think this was a choice. Krieger choosing what to spend his precious minutes on and what to leave out. Tess's job interview with the documentarian, for example, is just, it's hand-waved away by the movie. We don't get to actually hear the contents of this interview. You know, we don't get to see who Tess is when she's in her element. I'm really asking this. Is it unfair for me to say that I just wish that we had gotten to see this conversation? To see a version of Tess, of our main character, that is not constrained to the context of the horror film that she's in. Tess as a proactive character, not just a reactive one. One of the best rug pulls of the movie happens when we suddenly cut away to a completely new character played by Justin Long. He's just this cartoonishly awful douchebag sex criminal LA actor whose connection to the rest of the movie is completely unknown. I really loved this because it's just so unexpected. It's one of those fun zags I was talking about. But considering how little there ends up being to this character, I would have happily given up some or even most of the unbroken 25 minutes we get just of him if I could have gotten my Tess interview. Do you see what I mean? It's not exactly a criticism of the film as much as it's just mourning the film that it wasn't. Not that there aren't moments where the weak characterization does actively spill into, like, this is something to criticize. Take, for example, the character Andre. Now, Andre is a black homeless man who has lived for like more than a decade in this sort of abandoned and impoverished neighborhood in Detroit. An area that was economically gutted 30 years earlier by Reagan's awful racist housing policies. And I just want to show you a clip of how Andre is first introduced to us.
Hey! Come here! Hey, little girl! Come out that house!
Go away!
Now later we are told that all of that was just a misunderstanding. Apparently he'd been trying to warn Tess about the evils within the Airbnb that he knew about as a local. Here's a second clip of him explaining what he was trying to do.
You should have never went in that house to begin with. That's a bad place. And she ain't even the worst thing that's in there. Listen, you need to worry about you.
And real quick, can we see that first clip again?
Come out that house!
Go away!
I'm sorry, this just doesn't hold up. I mean, you see what Krieger is going for. You know, like, Tess, despite being a woman of color, probably has these preconceived notions about the type of people who might be living in this neighborhood. I mean, this is clearly demonstrated later in the movie when she is absolutely shocked that the police don't help her out. So here you have this nod to this theme of race politics and prejudice. A bait and switch with the way that we villainize homeless, and especially black homeless people, when the real villains are always the ones who own and or live inside of the houses. But can we just see that clip one more time?
Come here! Hey, little girl!
Why on God's green earth would Andre choose to approach Tess like this? How can he not see that that would terrify anybody, let alone a woman who is by herself in a strange neighborhood? Why wouldn't he just call out, like, hey, you're in danger, there's something really bad in that house? Like, this is not Tess misreading the situation due to her own preconceived whatever. This is just legitimately terrifying. And ultimately, it undermines Andre as a character because it makes no sense, and it seemingly conflicts with his, you know, very savvy characterization later on. And it undermines any attempt to parse a critique of Tess's internal assumptions or the internal assumptions of the audience. Because it's just staged to be scary so that it can be a little bit of a twist later on. And I want to emphasize that this is fine. This doesn't break the movie. None of this breaks it. I honestly didn't even really notice this inconsistency in Andre until a friend pointed it out to me, but this is partially because the movie does not actually invest very much effort or energy or attention into Andre, ultimately writing off his character in, again, a pretty hand-wavy kind of way. I think what this shows, again, is just more investment in the spectacle of the movie than in the characters within it. And I felt the same way about Keith, Bill Skarsgård's character. I would happily have taken 10 minutes away from Justin if I could have given those 10 minutes to Bill. And then you have Frank, who is a critical presence in this movie, and he's introduced with this another unbroken 6 minutes of screen time away from our protagonist. But if you cut that sequence out, you would get all of the information that you need to understand what's happening in just the environmental storytelling of the movie. Like, this sequence is cool cinematically. It has one of my favorite moments of stylized cinematography in the movie, but it's also just not justified when, again, it's 6 minutes out of 100. Couldn't those 6 minutes have maybe been better spent on Tess or Keith or even Andre? And I'm sorry to say this, but the resolution to Frank's storyline is so anticlimactic that it's the one thing in this movie I am willing to just sort of say is lazy. It's lazy, come on. Now for this essay, I'm not gonna address the other major character in the movie because I truly do not want to spoil the big twists of this film. And also because I'm unsure how to feel about her, because on the one hand, I feel like she is the best example of Krieger choosing spectacle over any deep characterization. But on the other hand, it kind of worked for me as a horror homage. So I don't know. I'm just gonna leave that one there for now. Chapter 4, the conclusion to the video essay about Barbarian. Barbarian is a good horror film, and it is good for horror. It's this weird dark horse film with these intensely disturbing ideas and images and a refusal to pander to sort of mainstream tastes. And it stars a fairly unknown black actress. And it was a huge hit, a mega hit, pulling in $45 million on a $4.5 million budget. So I hope more films like this, weird experimental films, get to be made because of how popular this one. And I'm sure Georgina Campbell is gonna get more work, and all of that is awesome. I am personally glad that Earth Prime Barbarian exists. But I just think it's interesting to consider the ways in which art is a series of mutually exclusive choices. You know, it's a decision tree. One door opens, another closes. And then there's another secret door and another secret door after that. And pretty soon you find yourself somewhere. Out of all of the infinite places you could have been, this is where you are. This is your movie. This is Earth Prime Barbarian. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed that, I'm trying to do a video essay every other week, so please subscribe, click the bell icon. We are New 32 Productions, an independent film company that is currently producing a horror film that I wrote. So if that seems interesting, there's always information in the links to these videos. I also just want to say thank you, because I've neglected to do this. I want to say thank you to Taylor and Creatorly Media for editing this. And I also want to give a special shout out to Harita for having the conversation with me that helped me clarify my feelings, my very conflicted feelings on this movie. And thank you, viewer, for taking a chance on a small channel and an unknown creator and lending me your time. Please, you know, feel free to comment. Let me know how you felt about Barbarian. What are some other movies you like this year? Catch y'all next time.